Hi, this is Steve Hansen from West Community. We're here at the Fair Maps Rally at the Eau Claire Government Center, and things should be starting soon. More or less. Oh, true.
We're gonna do a chat. Can you tell us if you can hear us?
I think.
Can you hear? Test, test.
There's trouble. Hi. Yes, I'm right here. I'm right here. I know the mask is fooling everybody. Yeah. If Steve didn't have his camera up here, we wouldn't know him either. Yes, we are live. If I had to start, because Facebook will throw me out otherwise.
How are you? Oh yeah, lots of times over the years. Absolutely. You know, of all things, one of the pluses of these for the last couple of years is saying, oh, winter time, it really feels good to have a mask. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh yeah. Over the years. Dan, thanks for stepping up.
Jeff, Annemarie McClellan.
Hi, Annemarie. Yeah. Thank you all. If you that went through.
Oh, I know. We made such an impact.
A lot of learning. Well, you know, it's a learning experience and the first go round. And I know no one was happy.
No, I'm telling
Sometimes
you.
when no one's happy, that's the best result.
Well, that's what
Called arbitration.
Bird said at our very first commission here. He said probably the best thing is when nobody's happy.
Yeah. That's what we always say in politics, but yeah.
Well,
That's balance. I think I'll go for that. Right now, on one side. What question?
Is that Tim Lino down there underneath the mask?
Absolutely.
Hi, Tim.
How are you?
I am fine. How are you?
Good, good.
So, since we're waiting to get started here, tell me about what you're interested in about fair maps and why they matter.
Well, I think the most important thing when it comes to fair and maps is government responsiveness. The thing of it is that if we have our elected officials that I have absolutely no fear of reprisal from the people that their voters at this particular time, they basically are able to pick and choose the projects, the items that they feel are important rather than the individual voters. And it's so critical at this particular time. There are so many different things that need to be taken care of. As a member of the board, Dunn County Board of Commissioners here.
Looks like we're getting ready to start.
It's showtime.
Hi, Jim. I'm Annemarie McClellan. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I've seen your name on email somewhere along the line.
that whistle means fair choice, fair map. Keep stuff this way.
Hi. Hi, everybody. I'm Ellen Ochs. I'm a co-president of the League of Women Voters, and I'm so glad to see everybody here. We gathered today out in the cold because we refuse to be left out in the cold. We're here today to demand fair maps.
Woo!
Fair maps. Fair maps. And fair representation. And we're here at this courthouse to also demand fair court. Fair court. Right now, as we speak, the highest court in the state is considering what redistricting map to choose. Fair maps? Fair court? But it has already made a questionable choice. In November, it insisted any map had to look like the 2011 maps, with the least change necessary. We know what those least changes mean.
What's necessary?
What's necessary? Those least changes mean entrenching a certain political party in power for another 10 years without their earning it. After all, a panel of federal judges ruled in 2016 that the 2011 maps were unconstitutional and said that no citizen of Wisconsin should have to endure another election under such unconstitutional maps. Fair maps. Fair courts. But now the Wisconsin Supreme Court is basically saying we should have unconstitutional maps for another 10 years? No! Why should we stand for that? No! Fair maps. Fair courts. The people of Wisconsin, by overwhelming margins, have said over and over again in polls, in county board resolutions, in countywide referendums, that we want independent, nonpartisan redistricting, that we want, so we won't sit still for another round of rigging. That's why we're here today. We're putting the Wisconsin Supreme Court on notice that the people of Wisconsin will hold them accountable for this partisan maneuver. Fair maps. Fair courts. And we're not going away. No matter the temperature, we'll continue to protest for fair maps until we, the people of Wisconsin, finally get what we want. And what we want is what we want is fair representation. What we want is a democracy that works for us. Thank you for coming today. We've got some great speakers, and we're going to keep it short and wrap up before you get frostbite. Our first speaker is Tim Lino. Now everybody's wearing black, so here's Tim Lino. He's on the Dunn County Board of Supervisors. He has served 2 terms. He's going for a 3rd. I'm from Dunn County. I've been on the county board myself. It's a great job to do for the people. It's sometimes boring and it's sometimes hard. I really admire people who do it.
Thank you so much.
I also can tell you that he's retired from a 35-year career in financial services. He's a member of a sportsman's group in Downsville, Wisconsin. My kids went to school at Downsville in the elementary school. And he voted for the resolution that the county board passed for fair redistricting. Let me hand it over to Tim Lee now. Give him a hand.
Thank you all for coming today in this cold, blustery day. I think it's definitely something you refer to as a Wisconsin day. But at this particular time, what I'd like to really talk about today is basically how we all fit into this program, kind of like a piece of puzzle. You know, once you find that piece of puzzle that you've been working on forever, you can put it in there, bam. Oh, closer. All right. Okay. But anyway, once you get to that piece of puzzle that fits in where it belongs, it's something really satisfying. But I think the most important thing when we're talking about fair maps, fair courts, is government responsiveness. And government responsiveness is something that we all want. And there's so many things that we ask our representatives, we suggest things, we really hope that they'll actually closely listen to what we have to say. But with these gerrymandered territories, these representatives have nothing to fear from the people. And it's so important at this particular time that we have the fair maps, that we have non-gerrymandered areas that we're allowed to make the adjustments, fill the needs of the people that aren't being filled at this particular time. Right now, in Dunn County, we're in a situation where only receiving reimbursement rates at 75 cents on a dollar for Medicaid. You know, it's taking care of grandma, folks. Come on, let's let the purse strings from Madison loosen up a little bit to help take care of things that need to be taken care of. Our roads, we absolutely got to be doing something on the roads. In 2019, I think the Assembly passed 19 different water bills, and none of those have made it through the Senate. And I think it's so important that these important aspects of life in Wisconsin get taken care of. And the problem with gerrymandering is it falls on deaf ears. Deaf ears. That nobody hears it, nobody cares, other than large checks, donations from Uline, Bradley Foundations. Those types of things that are ruining our government, making Wisconsin a difficult place to live for folks who are low income. And I think it's something that really needs to be pushed. I think it needs to be addressed on a county by county basis, which we did in Dunn County. And I think it's been done in Eau Claire County too, if my memory is correct. But 55 counties out of 72 in the state of Wisconsin have voted for fair maps. Yeah. Fair maps and fair court. What do the representatives need to hear from us? More. They need to hear our voices. They need to see our votes. They need us to direct them, move them in a better direction, so that we all as puzzle makers can put that piece of our lives in the right spot and feel the satisfaction. That we as individuals can make a difference for our communities. We as individuals can absolutely go where they need to go and get things done that need to be taken care of. And what it takes is everybody's help and everybody's vote. So what are we going to get? Thank you much.
Let's hear it for Tim Lino. And our next speaker today is Senator Jeff Smith. 15 years ago or thereabouts, he was trying to persuade the Dems down in Madison to set up nonpartisan redistricting, and they ignored him. Then a little later, he was not in power anymore, and he was trying to persuade the legislature, which was at that point majority Republican, to set up nonpartisan redistricting, and they ignored him too. Now, as a Democratic state senator in the minority, he's still trying to set up nonpartisan redistricting, and they're still ignoring him. I give you Senator Jeff Smith.
Thank you, Ellen. Y'all can hear me, right? All right. This is a rally. This is a rally. What do you really want? We want fair maps. We want justice. We want justice. And you know what's important is your vote. Your vote must count. That's what this whole country is built on. We have a system right now we're a faction that's working against democracy. And it's working both ends of the spectrum. They have convinced one side, one faction, that their votes were stolen. That because the results weren't what they wanted, their election was stolen. They've convinced that faction of that. They've convinced the other side, which is probably most of us, that you don't need to vote because it's gerrymandered anyway. So and now passing laws in state by state to take away people's rights to vote. It is a concerted effort to turn this country into a one-party fascist government to run this country. We can't let that happen. That's not who we are. That's not who we are. Just the other day, I had the opportunity in a public hearing on legislation introduced. There was a staffer from a Republican office who said in his comments that we're here in this Capitol to uphold the will of the people. He said that, and I had questions ready for him, but I had to start by saying, wait a minute. If we were here to uphold the will of the people, we would already have relinquished the power of gerrymandering. We wouldn't have gerrymandering. If we were here for the will of the people, we'd have, I know for a fact, we would have medical marijuana legal in the state of Wisconsin. If we were here for the will of the people, we would have all sorts of legislation, as was already mentioned by Tim, to protect our water, to protect our resources. I have introduced almost 100 bills, and we will do more before the end of the session. I've had one public hearing on a single bill out of all those bills I've introduced, because I'm in the minority. Politics come first in this state and in this country, and that isn't how it should work. We need fair maps. Yeah. We need fair courts for justice. Yeah. Now, I will tell you another thing. I want to lift you up, because in the case that is before the state Supreme Court, they set the parameters. They decided to pull in the Republican new idea, the new idea of holding the maps as close to the current maps as possible. New idea. How wonderful of them to think about you, the voters, so you don't get confused about where you are. Isn't that wonderful? So the state Supreme Court says that's what we expect of the maps before us. So they were handed maps. They were maps that were from different organizations, including, by the way, the governor's administration. And I give the governor's administration credit, because this is what they did. Their maps are less changed than the Republican maps. And if you want least change, which is the exact language the Supreme Court asked for, those are the maps that was the map they would adopt. I tell you that because you need to pay attention to what they finally come up with. That map that the governor's office presented them would actually have a state senate that is 17-16. Republican, by data, using data, 17-16. Isn't that a fair map? Yes. What the Republican map presented by data, would actually create a state senate that's 22-11. Now let me think here. I actually have been a while out of school, but that doesn't seem fair to me. Now that's just an example. There are a number of points in the data that point to that map that the governor's office presented as the least change when it comes to moving voters around. Now we will see if this state Supreme Court has the will of the people in mind, if they actually follow the justice which they were sworn to uphold. Now I was sworn to uphold the Constitution. I was sworn to also represent the people. And I don't think that it's just in my district. I think the whole state of Wisconsin, with every vote I take and every decision I make and every word I speak is supposed to represent the will of the people. And I'm here to do that. It's why I do what I do and why I came back after 8 years to fight for fair maps, for redistricting reform, for issue ad disclosure, for all the good things. And by the way, one last thing. Do you know what today is? The 21st of January. You know what 12 happened 12 years ago on this date? No. Citizens United decision in the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, so if you don't think votes matter, the state Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court are what is a perfect example of elections have consequences. To show up and vote. That is the most, no matter what happens in the moving forward, show up and vote. Thank you.
Let's hear it for Senator Jeff Smith. Yeah. Look at all of you. Look at all of you. Look at all those signs. This is super. This is amazing. And by the way, there's the gerrymander right there. That was the gerrymander. Our third speaker today, before I even mention our third speaker, there is hot coffee over here, and there are hand warmers. If you're suffering, there is hope right over there. So I'll introduce you our third and final speaker. Annemarie Mcclelland is my co-president with me with the League of Women Voters, Greater Chippewa Valley. I met her some four years ago or so when we started up the League of Women Voters in Dunn County because it had been out of order for 20 years. And she and I worked on a project together and we got to be friends, and then we got dumped into the co-presidency, which has worked out okay because we work together pretty well. I want to tell you that she is just dynamite with computer issues that help us so much because not all of us are. And she steps up. She really steps up. She took on helping to set up Vote 411. Vote411.org is a place you can go where you can read the words of the candidates themselves about what they want to do. And it takes a lot of work locally with various leagues to get that information up there. Then she got onto the People's Maps Commission, the governor's People's Maps Commission, and she was very helpful with that. So I'm going to start you off with Annemarie Mcwell. Give her a hand.
Thank you. It's kind of really hard to get up here after Tim and Jeff. You know, they're very good public speakers. Some of us have the gift and some don't. So I'm going to refer to my notes here. But when I'm talking, I'm speaking from my experience of being on the People's Map Commission as a representative for the 3rd Congressional District. And at the end of 2020, Governor Evers created the People's Map Commission and charged a nonpartisan group of citizens to create legislative and congressional maps. These maps would be free from partisan bias and partisan advantage while holding true to the traditional redistricting criteria. The commissioners fulfilled these obligations and received A+ scores on our maps from the Princeton Gerrymandering Project. Meanwhile, the legislators produced district maps, which maintained their partisan advantage, and it submitted them to the governor. These legislator-created maps, which, by the way, received Fs from the Princeton Gerrymandering Group, were not surprisingly rejected by the governor. So then, as expected, redistricting headed off to the courts, with the Wisconsin Supreme Court taking jurisdiction right now. Astonishingly, the governor was unable to submit the PMC maps to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. He supported these maps, so why couldn't he present them to the courts? Well, because on November 30th, 2021, the Wisconsin Supreme Court adopted the legislative leader's position that new maps should deviate as little as possible from the current district maps. The court mandated a least change criterion to be used to submit maps for the court's consideration. So for 1 year, the People's Maps Commission heard from almost 2,000 Wisconsinites across the state, and never once did we hear, "Leave our maps alone." We listened to 18 redistricting experts, and never once was the least change criteria ever mentioned. The PMC widely distributed our recommended redistricting criteria back in April of 2021, and it did not include least changes. Least change is not in the federal constitution. It's not in our state constitution. It is not in the Federal Voting Rights Act. Not only does the least change criterion have no constitutional or statutory basis, but the legislature itself declined to follow it when they redistricted back in 2010. So the Wisconsin Supreme Court approach that requires least change maintains the partisan advantage, leads to districts that continue to be unresponsive to voters, and contravenes the will of the people. Sorry. Elevating a least change approach is especially inappropriate because it means using as a starting point the existing maps that were drawn by one party that favors that same party. How can these maps be apolitical? A fair court should not seek to maintain a partisan plan that promotes the existing partisan advantage as its starting point. 56 of 72 Wisconsin counties passed resolutions or referendums that supported fair maps. Thank you all. 72% of all of us Wisconsinites in polls have said that we wanted to step away from partisan created maps and create a fair process. And gerrymandering, right? The will of the people has been suppressed by the unwillingness of the legislature to consider a bill that creates a fair redistricting process. The court's least change rule further cements the unfair partisan advantage of the previous maps, not only for the next 10 years, but really indefinitely. Robert Yablon, a UW Law School professor, has coined a term for this. The term is gerrymandering, and it's used to describe occurrences where map makers seek to perpetuate their favorable position by carrying forward key elements of the existing map. One tactic gerrymandering uses is locking, which is freezing the old lines as much as legally possible. Sounds like least changes, right? I would like to be able to ask the Supreme Court to avoid gerrymandering our district maps by changing their approach that put the least change as a dominant criteria. However, the court has already ruled on this. So we ask our state representatives and senators to pass a bill that provides a solid and fair framework for redistricting, so we are not at the same point again in 10 years. In conclusion, I offer a quote from John Lewis, the great civil rights activist and former representative from Georgia. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have to speak up. You have to say something. You have to do something. So many thanks to all of you and much appreciation for being here, doing something on this bitterly cold day with freezing hands and runny noses. So thank you all for being here. Let's hear it for Annemarie.
All right, we've got lots of good stuff on the table there. You can sign a voter's pledge that you will watch out for any candidate that is in favor of fair maps. What do you want? Fair maps and fair courts. End gerrymandering. So I've got some magnets that I just dropped some of that you can put on your car that say it ends gerrymandering to remind everybody. And I hope you have a wonderful day. And we want to thank all the organizers who put this together. That would include know them, but they're out there working hard to get all of these different rallies going. In more than 16 of them in Wisconsin going on right now. And League of Women Voters is involved, and Citizen Action has been very helpful, and Western Wisconsin nonpartisan voting districts has been helpful, and I can't remember all the others. But thanks to our speakers today, to Jeff Smith, to Tim Lino, and Marie Mcwell, and thank you all for coming, for leading us. So let me hear you yell, end the gerrymandering. Go for it.